Which elements did the ancients know about? For this video, I'm using the modern definition of the word element, a chemical substance whose atoms all have the same number of protons. For example, hydrogen is an element since all hydrogen atoms have 1 proton. Oxygen is also an element since all oxygen atoms have 8 protons. But water is not an element because it contains both hydrogen atoms and oxygen atoms bonded together, each of which have different numbers of protons to each other. It should go without saying that the ancients didn't have this understanding of atomic structure. They would have used various substances in their day-to-day lives, some of which we would classify today as an element. Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk about which elements were known in ancient times, and as we go through, I'll show you some of my favorite examples of ancient artifacts that are made from some of these elements. The first element to talk about is carbon. The name carbon comes from the Latin word carbo, meaning coal. You know where carbon shows up a lot? Fires. When fire is burning, it's usually the case that the oxygen can't get to the fuel quickly enough to allow it to combust completely, which means there's often incomplete combustion happening as well, producing soot, or charcoal, which is just carbon. So to talk about the history of carbon, we need to talk about the history of fire. How long have humans been using fire? Well, that is a big question. Archaeologists have found burnt flints and organic matter in a single site in Israel, which has been dated to around 790,000 years ago. Just to put that into perspective, we Homo sapiens only evolved around 200,000 years ago, which means that we have evidence of fire being used over 500,000 years before modern humans even showed up. How crazy is that? But when's our oldest evidence of carbon being intentionally used by our ancestors? Well, in northern Australia, there's a site called Nuwala, which is covered in the beautiful artwork you can see here. Now, these pieces are only a few hundred years old, but archaeologists have found a charcoal design on a small rock slab that had fallen from the ceiling, which they carbon dated to around 28,000 years ago. And this is just the oldest artwork that archaeologists have actually found. In all likelihood, charcoal has been used for even longer than that. So it seems that humans have been aware of carbon for a very long time. Next up, humans eventually started working with a handful of metals. They first began doing this because some metals are so unreactive that they can appear in their pure, metallic, or native form in nature. So they would have been easy to find. I have in my collection a book called The Playbook of Metals by John Henry Pepper, which was published way back in 1869. It's beautifully decorated and full of detailed illustrations, so I've been looking for an excuse to show it off in a video, and here we finally are. Chapter 3, The Metals and Their Combinations, begins with a table of every known metal at the time, the derivations of their names, their symbols, both alchemical and modern, their relative weights, many of which have since been proven to be incorrect, and the names of their discoverers. According to this table, there are 7 metals that were known to the ancients. In alphabetical order, they are copper, gold, iron, lead, mercury, silver, and tin. Let's start with copper. The name comes from the Isle of Cyprus, where it was first gotten in great plenty. The first age that followed the Stone Age was the Chalcolithic, or Copper Age, which began around 8,500 years ago and saw cultures all around the world start making tools and ornaments out of copper. Since copper is relatively unreactive, it sometimes occurs in its pure form in nature. Human beings would certainly have been intrigued by these beautiful crystals, and at some point they began working with them. The most primitive method used would have been cold working, which essentially involves hammering the metal into shape without applying any heat. Archaeologists have found copper artifacts in North America that were made this way, and dated them to around 8,500 years ago, marking the start of the Copper Age. Eventually, people learned that at high enough temperatures, copper will melt, and so they began smelting copper into even more intricate forms. There's evidence of copper smelting activity in Siberia occurring 7,000 years ago. In 1991, a 5,300-year-old mummy was discovered in the Utstal Alps, giving him his nickname, Utsi. Utsi is Europe's oldest known natural human mummy, and he was found in incredible condition. His 61 tattoos were clearly visible across his skin. The contents of his stomach allowed scientists to determine that he had eaten ibex meat within 2 hours of his death. His clothing and tools were also well maintained. He was discovered alongside a copper-bladed axe. This, along with high levels of copper in his hair, led scientists to speculate that during life, he himself may have been involved in copper smelting. What's really cool about the discovery of Ötzi is that he lived right around the end of the Copper Age and the beginning of the age that followed, the Bronze Age. Bronze is an alloy that consists of copper and tin. In a pure metal, the atoms are arranged in a lattice consisting of neat layers which, given enough force, are able to slide over each other. In an alloy like bronze, the mixture of the different sized atoms results in uneven layers, so a lot more force is required to make the layers slide over each other. This is why alloys tend to be much harder and stronger compared to pure metals. The discovery of bronze allowed much stronger tools, weapons, and armor to be crafted. Armies equipped with bronze would have a huge advantage over armies without it. Tin is a lot rarer than copper, so tin ore became an extremely valuable commodity during the Bronze Age, which drove the expansion of vast trade networks across Europe and Asia, and aided in the development of several great civilizations around the Mediterranean and the Middle East. The Bronze Age lasted around 2,000 years until the 12th century BC, when the next age began, the Iron Age. Around this time, technological improvements allowed furnaces to be built that could reach much higher temperatures high enough to melt iron. Now, the oldest known iron artifacts actually date back to the beginning of the Bronze Age, around 3200 BC, but these were made by hammering meteoric iron, literally iron found in meteors. It wasn't until the Iron Age when humans began smelting iron. In the centuries that followed, this also allowed people to forge steel, which is an alloy of iron and carbon. When you start learning about these ancient civilizations, it really is incredible to see just how advanced they were thousands of years ago. We humans have achieved so much since the dawn of civilization, it's kind of mind-blowing to think about. Imagine if civilization ended today and we needed a single encyclopedia to help us start all over again. Luckily, hungry minds already thought of that, and they put together something called the Book, the ultimate guide to rebuilding a civilization. Basically, if the world ever hit reset, this would be our cheat code. With over 400 pages of detailed descriptions of humankind's greatest inventions and discoveries, the book is packed with beautifully detailed illustrations that were designed by a team of talented artists. If you're a fan of my videos, you'll love the book. It's full of science and history, with chapters covering a load of essential knowledge, ranging from making fires to crop rotation to generators and to building tanks. I've been obsessed ever since I got my copy. It's the kind of book that you can pick up for a minute and end up spending hours getting lost in the pages. I've been particularly enjoying the chapter on materials, which covers a lot of the elements that I talk about in this video. Since we're coming up to Christmas, it's time to start thinking about gifts, and if you know someone with an inquisitive mind, the book is a great idea. It's way more than a regular history or science book. It's a work of art, with hundreds of thousands of copies already sold, and it was one of the top projects in Kickstarter history. If you use my link in the description below and enter my promo code CHEMISTORIAN10, you'll also be able to get a special Christmas discount. Alright, let's get back to learning about ancient elements. So, we've covered carbon, copper, tin, and iron. Let's talk about gold next. Peppers says that the name is probably from the Hebrew, signifying to be clear or to shine. Similarly, Wikipedia says that the name originates from this Proto-Indo-European word, which I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce, meaning to shine, to gleam, or to be yellow or green. In reference to the earliest uses of gold, Pepper says that it must be remembered that King Solomon received 666 talents of gold, being more than 27 tons weight, in 1 year, and all of King Solomon's drinking vessels were gold, and all the vessels of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. None were of silver. It was nothing accounted of in the days of Solomon. Book 1 Kings, chapter 10, verse 21. Now, King Solomon most likely reigned around the 10th century BC, so roughly 3,000 years ago. Even if this biblical passage was exaggerated, it certainly suggests that humans were using gold back then. However, we know that gold was used even earlier than this. In the book A History of Chemistry by Ernst von Meyer, he says, "The noble metals, gold and silver, whose stability in the fire had not escaped the ancients, were those earliest known in prehistoric times, and were highly valued. The fact of their occurring native, and the ease with which they can be worked, afford a sufficient explanation of this. The gold mines of Nubia," the Egyptian name Nub, i.e. gold, is perhaps connected with the designation of that country, "were worked very extensively by the Egyptians. In the time of Ramesses II, the mines yielded gold to the value of £125 million sterling per annum." This book was published in 1906, so adjusting for inflation, that's over £13 billion today. Ramesses II reigned during the 13th century BC. Take a look at some of the beautifully intricate gold jewellery dating from this time. The Egyptians were evidently very skilled when it came to using gold. So clearly, humans had already been familiar with gold for a long time, even by this point. Let's go back even further. At the Royal Cemetery at Ur, in modern-day Iraq, golden artifacts including this ornate gold helmet were discovered, which have been dated to the first dynasty of Ur in the 26th century BC, 1,300 years before Ramesses II's time. So even at this point, humans were adept at using gold. Currently, the oldest gold jewellery ever discovered was in the Varna necropolis, located in Bulgaria near Lake Varna. The items here were dated to between 4,600 and 4,200 BC, 6,500 years ago, and over 3,000 years before Ramesses II's time. We can see that these items are a lot more primitive compared to the later Iraqi and Egyptian artifacts. Maybe it was around this time that humans first started working with gold, but maybe not. There is evidence of pieces of gold being found in caves that were used by Paleolithic humans 40,000 years ago. They certainly would have been interested in these shiny discoveries, but when they first began working with them remains a mystery. The next element to discuss is silver. Pepper says that the name is probably from the Hebrew signifying money. Von Meyer said of silver that the enterprising Phoenicians are supposed to have supplied to the other civilized nations from Armenia and Spain, where rich silver ores occur. Artifacts made from silver, dating from around 4,500 years ago, have been discovered in places such as Armenia and Iraq. Silver is another unreactive metal which can be found in its native form, but it's regularly found along with other metals, including gold and lead. This means that humans would have needed to have figured out how to separate metals such as these from each other. The first evidence of intentionally separating these metals emerged around the time that standardized coinage was invented, around the 6th century BC. Croesus, the king of Lydia, is credited as being the first person to issue what's called a bimetallic standard, whereby coins consisting of two different metals, gold and silver, were specified to have a fixed exchange rate between them. Croesus's coins, called Cressid, were related in that one gold coin was equivalent in value to 10 silver coins, just like how in the US today, $1 is equivalent in value to 10 dimes. But how did they actually separate raw gold from silver if the two were found together in the same ore? Well, all they had to do was heat the gold-silver alloy strongly with sodium chloride, which is just regular salt, along with brick dust in a sealed container. The brick dust, which consists of aluminium oxide and silicon dioxide, aids in the decomposition of the sodium chloride in salt to form, amongst other things, chlorine. Because silver is slightly more reactive than gold, it would react with the chlorine to form silver chloride, but the gold would remain unchanged. The silver chloride, being more volatile than the gold, would then separate off, leaving pure gold behind. Once the gold was removed, you could then heat the silver chloride with an even more reactive metal such as lead to give you lead chloride and pure metallic silver. So, how about lead? Check out these ancient Greek sling bullets from the 4th century BC. The one on the left depicts a winged thunderbolt, and the one on the right bears an inscription that translates to "Take that." How cool is that? But the oldest human-made lead items actually date back to between 6,000 and 8,000 years ago. Lead had many uses in the ancient world. The ancient Egyptians used it in cosmetics, and later on the ancient Romans used it to make water pipes. In fact, the Latin word for lead, plumbum, is where we get the word for plumbing, as well as the chemical symbol for lead. Von Meyer said, since cooking utensils were often made of lead, symptoms of lead poisoning occurred frequently, but notwithstanding this, the metal was used as a medicine. There's one more metal to discuss, and it's by far the weirdest one. It's the only metallic element that's a liquid at standard temperature and pressure: Mercury. The metal Mercury is named after the fastest moving planet, which in turn was named after the Roman god Mercury, whose Greek equivalent, Hermes, was associated with, amongst other things, speed. The old name for the metal Mercury is quicksilver due to its liquid properties. Mercury can be found in its pure, liquid form in nature, but it's more commonly found in the mineral cinnabar. Von Meyer said, the first records as to Mercury are to be found in Theophrastus, about 300 BC, who gives its preparation from cinnabar by means of copper and vinegar, and terms it liquid silver. I actually already have an entire video about how the ancients got mercury using this technique, so I'll link that below if you want to check it out. But mercury has been found in ancient Egyptian tombs that date back to around 1500 BC. In the 3rd century BC, the first emperor of a unified China, Qin Shi Huang, would drink mercury, thinking that it would grant him a long life. He died at the age of 49. Legend has it that he was buried in a tomb that was filled with rivers of mercury. His resting place was to be guarded for all of eternity by the famous Terracotta Army. Today, although the Terracotta Army has been largely excavated, nobody has been inside the tomb itself. However, soil samples taken from the mound above it show unusually high levels of mercury, so perhaps there's some truth in the old legends. In the Odyssey, composed by Homer around the 8th century BC, there's an interesting line just after a great battle towards the end. When they had done this, they washed their hands and feet and went back into the house, for all was now over. And Odysseus said to the dear old nurse, Euryclea, "Bring me sulphur, which cleanses all pollution, and fetch fire also that I may burn it and purify the cloisters." Sulphur, apart from carbon, is the only other non-metallic element that the ancients knew about. You may have also heard of fire and brimstone being referred to in various Abrahamic religious texts, for example when it rained down on the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah in the Old Testament. Brimstone is actually another word for sulphur. So sulphur is another element that's been known for a very long time. Lastly, a few honourable mentions. Zinc, arsenic, antimony and bismuth were used by the ancients, but not in their pure forms. Their compounds found a variety of applications, including in the production of various alloys, such as different types of bronze, but the metals themselves weren't isolated until much later. It wasn't until 1669 AD that the first element that wasn't known by the ancients was discovered. It's a really weird story, and I already have an entire video about it, so I'll link it below if you want to know what happened next. Let me know in the comments below if I've missed any discoveries from early human history, and if you made it this far and you want to help out the channel, please consider liking and subscribing. Also, I have a Patreon if you're interested in supporting the channel further and getting some bonus content while you do. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.